Good morning, everyone. Here I am on the platform, sitting by a table on the Sunday morning, and I'm not here. So we got a little bit of different presentation we want to share with you this morning, and I just know that the Lord's really going to use it. Maybe approximately a year or so ago, Wayne and Nikki Chapman, who you've known for about 25 years. As a matter of fact, as a side note, Wayne and Nikki moved into our church family the May after I moved in to your church family in October. So I celebrate 25 years this October. Next May, Wayne will have served as our church pianist for 25 years. And so we've known them the entire time, just about the entire time that we've been here, as have you. Well, Wayne and I were talking about some of the struggles and the trials that you're going to hear about in just a few moments. And I asked him if he would be willing to share that testimony with our church. Both of us love the old animated Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer presentation around Christmas time, and there's a line in there that he's borrowed, and I've given him permission, as if I have the rights to Rudolph. I've given him permission to use for the title of today's message. His message this morning is, "And then it hit, the storm of all storms." And if you remember Rudolph, it hit right before Christmas. Well, Wayne and Nikki have gone through some trials that a lot of you have not been aware of, and they've graciously decided to join me on the platform this morning and to just navigate an interview type process and unpack that process with you all. So buckle in, especially if you're watching online or you're sitting in the pews and you're really in the slough of despair or despond, and you're battling a really bad bout with anxiety or worry or depression. So I think the Lord is going to encourage you. So Wayne, Nikki, thank you so much for joining us. And if you're okay, we'll just dive right into some questions I have jotted down, and you guys kind of know what I'm going to ask you, but we're going to try to stay on point. Good enough?
Great.
All right. Wayne, first of all, I've already told our folks, you have gone through one challenging time, and that challenging time has redefined your relationship with God. So tell us how all that began.
Well, first, Tim, I want to say that we're not up here to brag. We're not up here to say that we have it all together, because we certainly don't. And we've been through some tough situations. And some of the things I'm going to say are going to probably lead to some more questions that people have, or just lean you to start questioning some things. But if you're prone to do that, don't do that, because you're going to miss what God has to say in all this. So I say all that to kind of as a preface to what I want to talk about. As far as I can remember back, I guess it was about 10, 11 years ago. We were a happy family of four, me and Nikki and Hannah, who's now 21, and Gates is 14. But we have been coming here for 25 years. We're all saved. We've had our quiet time. We've trusted in God, but we're just living life. And I had been the executive director at the Billy Hardy Home for Boys for about 10 years. And we had grown tremendously. We had revamped some things, and we're serving a lot of people. And then I think it was about 2008 and on into 2013, that's the time in the United States where we experienced a recession. And that recession really made things hard on us at the Billy Hardy Home for Boys. And it put us in a situation where we were relying a lot on donors. And those donors weren't able to give the dollars that we needed to sustain ourselves. So we sought the Lord, we prayed, and we came up with a strategy that we felt like God had blessed, and just we felt like we were headed in the right direction. We changed our business model, and kind of really just revamped the whole organization and providing more and more services to children and families. And we really felt like we were in the will of God at that point. And we were serving a lot more people, and we added more staff to the organization, and just really started to see God move in a big way with children and families in our area. And then it hit. It really started to take hold in the PD, where our funders, they just weren't able to sustain us like we wanted to, and we weren't able to climb out of the recession. We had payroll and operating expenses to meet, and we had to come to a point where we had to make some drastic decisions. And that made it especially tough because now children and families are depending on us. Our work family and employees are depending on us. Folks that have been with us for 10 or 20 years are really relying on us and depending on us to figure out a way through this. So the pressure just started mounting on me. During that time, I was still praying. I took the needs of the organization to God every morning, literally on my knees. But around 2012, 2013, I just felt like the windows of heaven just closed, and I stopped hearing from God, or I felt like I was. I felt like maybe He was hearing my prayers, but He wasn't answering the way I wanted Him to answer. So I became discouraged as the expenses mounted, as the thoughts of people depending on me mounted. I grew more and more anxious, and with the anxiousness came worry, and from there I started worrying all the time. And so when I was even at home, I was not present. I was in my mind trying to figure things out, and taking the ownership of the problem on my shoulders. And Nikki would kind of say, "Wayne, you're not present with us." I was there physically, but emotionally and mentally, I was not there. I was just constantly worrying about the situation. And with the anxiety comes sleeplessness. And so there would be times that I really I could barely sleep, or didn't sleep at all last night. So as more and more pressure mounted on me, I started losing hope. And that hope kind of just turned into despair.
You described just right then moving from feelings of discouragement to a feeling of despair. At that point, how did all of that play itself out and affect your different relationships?
Well, I'd like to say that I handled it very well, but I didn't. I really felt like as each day passed, you alluded to it when you first started, I really felt like I was in the slough of despond or despair. So I started isolating myself. I started pulling back from the people I loved. I didn't want to go out with my friends because then I would have to talk about work. Nikki would tell me later, a few years later, that friends of ours would say, you come up to her privately and just say, "What's wrong with Wayne?" And or "What's going on with Wayne? He just doesn't seem like himself." My relationship with Nikki changed. I became isolated from her. I stopped sharing my feelings with her. I stopped spending time with my kids. Didn't want to go to ball games. Didn't want to go outside and play throw the ball with Gates. I just really wanted to unplug. There were times, I'm a movie buff, you know that. And so there were times I would sneak away and go to the movies alone, just so I could unplug from the world and get my mind off of things. So then I moved into once I became despondent and in despair, Then the only way to get away from all of that pressure and anxiety was to sleep. And I slept. I mean, it would not be uncommon to go to bed when I got home and get up the next morning and still feel tired. And Nikki would, and I say this in kind of in funniness, but Nikki would come in and say, "You're sleeping again? You just got up." But I was just so tired. I was worn, just physically worn out from all of the worry and anxiety. I stopped talking to my friends. I stopped talking to my parents. And I just shut down in every way, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I had lost all my hope. And I really started to question God and say, "God, what is happening? Why aren't you answering my prayers? Where are you in all of this? And really, how long is this going to last?" Is kind of where I'm going. I thought we were in your will. We prayed about this thing and it's not going right. Where are you, God? That's kind of where I was at that point.
Yeah, and you've used a lot of different words to describe sort of where you were, but you haven't really used the D word, depression. Would you say you were suffering from depression?
Yes, I really didn't know that was what it was at the time. But once I go back and read what the symptoms of depression are, losing no energy, sleeping all the time, not interested in things that I used to be interested in. Those were the classic signs, and I was really anxious, had anxiety issues and depression at the same time. I don't know how to describe it, but there are periods during this time that I really don't recall them. And Nikki will have to help me remember things because I just don't have a memory of what happened. And that's how deep of a depression I went into.
So Nikki, you're sitting there beside your husband, and I want to direct this next question to you. First of all, thank you also for joining him and being willing to be vulnerable and talk about this. When did you know something had really changed or something was significantly wrong with Wayne? Would you just talk about that for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, at first I think it was some slow changing at first. I noticed little things like he wasn't interested in the things that he was interested before. He's always loved his telephone, and he stopped even looking at his phone. He's always loved music. He'll sit for hours and just listen to music at night, and he stopped doing that. He stopped going, wanting to go with friends, just doing anything in a crowd. And so that just kind of started, and then it just began to evolve more and more. He didn't have any energy. However, when the deep despair came, we noticed it because it just shook our family. Everything about what we did, all of our routines changed. Eating at the dinner table as a family stopped. He would be upstairs sleeping and we would eat dinner without him. I mean, it just really, things just changed for us. In the beginning, he was still praying every day, but I could tell that he didn't have any hope and he didn't have any joy. I knew that the stress at work was overwhelming, but I knew that it was more than just stress. And I didn't know how to help him through it. We had a conversation one time riding down the road, and I remember it like it was yesterday, and I asked him, "Wayne, do you feel like you would hurt yourself?" And he said, "Yeah, I've had those thoughts." And then shortly after that, he had a speaking engagement, and this particular type of engagement that he did, he loved to do. It was with his peers, and it was talking about the programs and things that always interest him and gave him energy, and this was different. We got in front of the group of people, probably 200 people, and I felt like he was having a panic attack. I could see his body language. I could tell in the way his voice was sinking, kind of, that he was having a panic attack in front of everybody. And that's when I knew he was in trouble. And that's when I knew that we needed to get help. And he had stopped praying, and he had stopped doing his devotion. And even when I would try to pray with him, and he wouldn't. And I could just tell then that something had changed between his relationship with God.
Right, thank you. Wayne, when did everything come to a head? And in your opinion, what was the breaking point, so to speak?
I think first, when Nikki asked me that question, I was so ashamed to admit that I did that. And later, I don't know if she remembers, I know she remembers this. She told me she immediately dropped me off, and she went to our house and took the guns out of the house. That's how serious it was. But something happened in the fall of 2012 that really shook our community up, and it was just the right seed of doubt and hopelessness that Satan used to plant that in my head and start thinking, well, maybe it would be better if I wasn't around, or I could just end all of this and we wouldn't have these problems anymore. So when I told Nikki that, then she said, well, we got to get help. And I said, well, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, we're going to talk to your doctor first. And so we went and saw my primary care physician, and he was very sympathetic, and he plugged me into a counselor there at McLeod. And then we were able to see a psychiatrist, and he formally diagnosed me with anxiety and depression disorder. And then we started a medicine regimen, and that really, we started with just your regular traditional counseling. Then we tried some spiritual counseling in 2 different areas, but that really didn't seem to work.
And you were playing the piano still through all of this.
Yes. I can't communicate this adequately, but you know, Satan had robbed me of the joy of playing the piano, and there were just times that I really don't even know how I got to church. That I just didn't know how I got here, and I could not wait to get out of here and get home so I could go to sleep and unplug again. So Satan had really robbed me of everything that I enjoy doing, and that was one of them. Then late May, or around the 1st of May, middle of May, my grandmother, Granny Chapman, got sick, and she wasn't going to get any better, so they called hospice, and she wanted to go home. And so late May, she passed away, and Granny was our backbone. And then, I mean, we had the funeral, and 2 weeks later, we were watching the boys drive out of the driveway at the boys' home, and we were turning off the lights, and the boys' home closed. And I mean, and that really made it hard for Nikki too, because I mean, that's the only thing she had known for 40 years, or close to it, maybe 30 years, 33 years at that point. So
You want to get
I'm
that
not
age
giving
thing
the
right?
number.
so it was all right. And, you know, I had really lost everything. I had lost my job. Satan had robbed me of all my joy. I didn't really have much to live for at that point. So that's kind of where I was.
Appreciate that. We're going to get to the good news and when things started to change for the better. But first, Nikki, while Wayne was in this process and seeking help, and what was this part of this whole journey like for you?
Well, I think one thing, the reason why I wanted to do this with Wayne is because I wanted to give the message that people don't go through this alone. And it was his battle with depression and anxiety, but we were right there with him. And so it wasn't easy for us either. And I felt very helpless. I felt like I didn't have the answers for him. I did talk to some of his closest friends and let them know what was going on so that I at least had that support. And then I went into control mode, and those who were closest with me knows what that looked like. I mean, I spoke for him, I covered for him, I managed as much of our lives at work as well as at home as I could. I was just working to try to. I tried to. When I say I covered for him, I tried to. It's not that I was really trying to make people not know what was going on for him, but I wanted him to keep his dignity. You know, I wanted him to keep his pride, and so that's what I felt like I was doing. I was overwhelmed, but I didn't have time to stop. And I wish I could say that I kept God at the center of the whole time, but truth be told, I was spinning, and I just did daily tasks and just did everything I could to get through the day with the children and then again at work. I had friends that were praying for me. I had family that would call me often, but I felt very lonely. I felt like nobody really knew what we were going through. Nobody could really understand what we were facing. I went to appointments with Wayne. I supported him as much as I could. And then I remember praying several times, not just one time. I prayed, God, you can have everything. You can have all my possessions. You can have everything. Just give me my husband back. Because I really just missed Wayne, and I missed what he meant to our family. And little did I know how long the ripple effect would last and what that was really going to look like, but I got him back.
Good deal.
Yeah.
So let's talk about getting him back and how God began to work. So when did things start to change for you?
I want to say things changed immediately, but they didn't. One of our church members placed a bookmark in my piano folder, and that gave me some hope. It's Hebrews 10:23. Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we say we have, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. And that really kind of, I think, really got me going again. It didn't cure everything, but I had this little glimmer of hope. So we're about June 2013. You know, I had to go through 3.5, maybe 4 months of unemployment. Nikki was unemployed at that time. She got a job before I did, which helped us out. And so I landed a job at a big company in Florence, and that was hard because I was going from, you know, making lots of decisions that impact a lot of people, and being able to make my own decisions to, you're just a supervisor and you work for us. You're going to do what we say. And I had to learn some humility through all of that. But around 2013, December 2013, I remember, I don't know if Nikki remembers, I texted her and said, I think my depression is gone. And she texted back and she said, you don't know how happy that makes me to hear you say that. So, and I felt like some of it might have been situational depression, but I know it was a lot more than that. But I really started to gain some success from my role at work and starting to feel valued again. And so I just kind of started asking God, did you heal me? I mean, I really felt like the load of depression had been removed and that I had at least started on the path to healing. But I don't think, well, I know Satan was not done yet. And he reared his ugly head once again, and boom, it wasn't a week later that I got some really harsh, disturbing news, and it was just financially crushing and debilitating. And so then I felt, I'd taken one step forward and then been knocked back 2 steps. I'm on the road to healing, but here's another consequence and another issue to have to deal with, and maybe I'm not out of the woods yet.
Yeah, you speak of being healed, or kind of even uncertain about being healed or the possibility of being healed, but and Satan reared, he wasn't finished, and he wasn't even finished after that. You had to face something else, another challenge in 2015. So talk about that for just a few moments.
That's probably the hardest thing to talk about. In March or February, late February, March, my mom contracted pneumonia, and sometime during the night she aspirated and she developed a bacterial infection in her lungs, and that led to ARDS, which is really the hardening of the cilia inside of your lungs and not able to, and scar your lungs so severely that you're not able to breathe on your own again. And so it was a Sunday, March 8th, that we watched Mom pass away in the hospital. And that was really hard. It was really devastating to our family. And we went through all of that up until 2015, and I felt like that was hard, but this was really hard. So I began the grief cycle, and I think that's lasted almost as long, if not longer, than the depression and anxiety. And I accepted her death, but then I moved into the anger stage of it, and I was angry, and I was angry at God. I tried to hold it together while I was in public, but I know I took it out on the kids and with Nikki and all the people I hold dear. And so she passed in March. It was August. Dad called and said, I'm not feeling well. Ken, our doctor, says he thinks it's diverticulitis. So he gets that under control. We think he's well. He gets another kind of attack, and so they send him to get a colonoscopy, and he calls and said they found a tumor. And I'm like, oh my. And the tumor was the size of a softball or a large navel orange. And so then now we have the C word to have to deal with. And I'm like, what else, God? What else? How long is this going to last? I'm really feeling like Job here. So during this time, I've moved from depression to grief and fighting through the grief cycle. And then my role changed again to caregiver for him, spending the night at the hospital, going home with him, dressing wounds, and taking care of him. But God was good, and he saw us through that. Dad's cancer, they removed part of his colon and removed the tumor. And thank goodness the rest of his tests came back, no cancer whatsoever and no chemo. So we made it through that. So then we just kind of maintained there, but the holidays, the birthdays, the kids missing their Nana. When your kids hurt, you hurt, and that makes you angry that you can't fix that.
Yeah, I have down one of the list of questions that I have for you. You've covered a little bit. I want you to do me a favor this time, because I was sitting here looking, and I think each word on this little paragraph says a lot. So my question is, how did these events challenge your relationship with God? Read this paragraph to your church family just for a moment, and then we'll get to the good stuff.
Sure. During this time, I was angry at God. I knew I shouldn't, and it was wrong to feel that way, I knew in my mind that I was his child, but in my heart I was hurting, really hurting. I felt like God was there, but he wasn't. I knew I was supposed to have a relationship with him, but I didn't want to. I had all but ceased praying. And just to kind of put it in perspective for you, this is how bad it was. I didn't even want to say the blessing because I was so angry at God.
Thank you. I had him read that, those of you who are watching and listening, because somebody I know today is feeling that same thing. All the words he used were relational words: anger, disappointment, bitterness, grief, frustration. And so I just thought it was important. Thank you, Wayne, for honoring us with those words. So let's get to some good stuff. What did you do?
I think it was around 2016. I could be wrong with the dates because all that kind of runs together, but I had gone over to Lifeway. And I was trying to find some books on grief because I know I was going through the grief cycle, and I found this book by Max Lucado, and it's You'll Get Through This. And I picked it up and I started reading it, and it's a story about Joseph and the challenges he went through. And I immediately thought, okay, there are other people that need to read this book. So I asked him if he would let us do a small group and do that. And so we planned it for Sunday night. And you know, God has a sense of humor. So, you know, I put a thing out there on Facebook if anybody wanted to come and participate in the group. And 5 or 10 minutes later, my dad's on the phone. What's this group you're doing? You'll get through this. I think I want to take that with you. And my friend Bobby wants to come too. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to go through the grief cycle with my dad yet. But that was where I kind of started the healing process. And, you know, I might have the dates wrong, but Top Gun kind of we kicked that off 2.0 again, somewhere around there. And that got me back to reading. It got me back with friends. It got me back with my peers, and we started studying the Bible, and we started reading books together and doing life together. And I think it was about the time that you stepped back from teaching Sunday school, and we changed the rehearsal time in here, and that allowed me to get back into a Sunday school class, and that got me reading again, and that got me going again. And then music really played an important role with me during this time. Even though I didn't listen for hours, there were just songs that really touched my heart that the songwriters could write and say the way I wanted to say it. I just didn't have the words to say it. One of the songs that is one of my favorites is a song by 10th Avenue North. Is the title of it's Worn. And that really describes what I was feeling like from 2013 to 2016 or 18.
All right, well, I'm almost finished with you. So God started putting the pieces back together, and Nikki, I'm assuming things got better as he was evolving and growing and coming back. God was slowly giving you your husband back.
Yes.
And so talk to me just briefly, or talk to us briefly. How's it all been since 2016? How have you, if I may use the term from a book, how have you failed forward, or what has God taught you through this?
Well, I wish I could say that from 2016 forward was great, and that the healing process, you know, took its course and I got better. But there was setback after setback during this time. 2018, Nikki and I had to make some really hard financial decisions for our home. A month later, we moved into her parents' home. A month later, Hurricane Matthew hit, and there was 4.5, 5 feet of water under our house. We really didn't know if we were going to be able to, we were going to have somewhere to live at that point. And then flood after flood after flood. 6 floods in 5 months hit us, and they all had their own impact on us. But we just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And without doing that, you can't stay still. You have to keep moving, even if it's just a half a step at a time. We just kept putting one foot in front of the other. 2020 has, brought us our own challenges. Dad, in fact, today he closed on our childhood home and sold it. And all this past week, I've been moving him out and packing up everything we held dear at home. And that was tough. And so that reignited all the grief and it just reared its ugly head again. And I had to go through that again. And just last night, we were dealing with the grief of it all again. So, but through it all, God has been faithful.
Amen.
Every step of the way.
Yes, and those of us who are closest to you will add to that, and then we're done for this part. The difference, the circumstances of your life haven't been all that different. You've had storm, if I may use that, floods, grief, and opportunities to go back into the slough of despair. And yet, those of us who are closest to you have seen your joy. And whatever God did through the workings of church family and through what seemed like coincidences for you to pick up books, for the encouragement from your wife and your children, He's brought you back. And you indeed, I think, sit, I started to say stand, but you sit before your congregation and your church family as an example of having a life that's laid a foundation on the rock rather than the sand. Now, by the time they see this, on the night that your home place was closed and gone, I'm preparing you a message on the sand versus the solid rock. And that resonates with me as I hear your words and your testimony. I want to thank you both. You guys sent me the answers to your questions, and I've read through it, but there's nothing like the courage and the willingness to just verbalize that. And I don't want to make you feel weak, but one of the reasons it's taken about a year or so for you to be able to get here, because you wanted to be able to solidly stand and share your story in interview form and without a lot of emotional scars showing and seeping through. So I know it's been really, really difficult for both of you, but thank you so much. And we really know that God's going to use your story, not just here today, but in the future to encourage a lot of folks, maybe even